Well, now let's talk about the situation in Spain, where the government is breaking itself for a possible declaration of independence by Catalonia's leaders. The region's president says he is prepared to go ahead with the declaration if Madrid refuses to enter into dialogue. Well, joining us from Madrid now is Alana Moceri, who is an international relations analyst and professor of the European University of Madrid. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Professor. It seems that this confrontation between Madrid and Barcelona in terms of government is only going to get worse.
That's what it seems, I fear. Really, I think the biggest story here is just how these tensions have been escalated in a way that just wasn't necessary. I think we see a lack of leadership on both sides in this sense. And that's what's really happening. And for most people in Spain, most people who are not on either extreme of this issue are finding the whole situation rather surreal, to be honest.
I mean, why doesn't the Madrid government concede that probably the best thing to do would be to have a proper referendum in Catalonia to see what the public opinion really is?
Right. I mean, there was one a few years back, and the same thing. It was a referendum that wasn't legally binding, and the results weren't really strong either way. The people who were against it, once again, just didn't vote, much like this last vote. And certainly something like along those lines could really just lower the tensions. We know that it's not necessarily a majority in Catalonia that does want independence, and to make such a move, there would have to be a solid one. And so what I think is we see on both sides, from Prime Minister Rajoy and Puigdemont on the other side, is both of them are playing to their political bases. Instead of being the leaders of their region, of their country, they're playing to the political base that elected them, which is a dangerous game. And Spain is not the first country we've seen this happen in. But usually in a democracy, when someone's elected, we're looking for them to take care of all their people and to represent all of their people. And neither of these two leaders is doing so.
We also saw King Philippe line up with the Madrid government. Why did you do that?
Well, I think it's tough in his position as king. He's not supposed to be taking any political positions. And perhaps the only political position he can do is to support the government that he indeed gave permission to form. And so in that sense, to me, it wasn't terribly surprising. And even though, a lot of people felt that he could have made a stronger call for dialogue and for peace. But unfortunately, he didn't. It was a pretty important moment for him because, and as we know, it was a few years ago when he became king. It was very controversial here in Spain, and this was a moment he had to really show his worth, and I'm not sure he passed that test.
Do you think that the positions taken by the Madrid government run the risk of actually hardening the pro-independence movement in Catalonia to the point that it could have a majority?
Well, that's what it's definitely what we're seeing is that most people in Spain are in favor of seeing some sort of an actual referendum, and particularly in Barcelona, but by not allowing it to happen, and just the fact that there was such a huge police presence and there was some violence that just escalated the tensions in such a way and really outraged people who felt that this referendum was illegal and shouldn't have gone through, but were very, very unhappy with what happened that day on the 1st of October. So by all means, certainly, it seems to me that he could have done much better to not have escalated a police presence there and let it go through, and then just say, hey, listen, this is great. The people spoke. Some of the people spoke. Only 42% of those people spoke, which delegitimizes that, quite a bit. And say, but it's not legally binding. And so that's that. But by bringing in the police and the tension that came with it, really turned this into a very different moment for Spain, and a moment that the whole world has now been watching and wondering if there's a human rights issue or not, which is really damaging to Spain's image in the world.
So what do the Catalan government now have to weigh up as they consider whether to make tomorrow a unilateral declaration of independence?
And I think we'll all be holding our breath, waiting to see what happens tomorrow. By most accounts, whatever they do will indeed be symbolic. But I think right now, symbolism has become so strong that it almost doesn't matter if it's a symbolic declaration of independence and not one that's actually legally binding. By saying those words, it's going to escalate tension even more. And it looks like Prime Minister Rajoy feels even more boxed into a situation where he has to perhaps invoke Article 155, which would in which the Spanish government would take over Catalonia, take control of it, which would be a really sad day indeed. I think that sort of thing. There's people in Catalonia, as you asked before. Yes, it grows people's sense of wanting independence instead of wanting to be part of Spain. If the president of your country is taking such measures against your region, so the whole thing is really becoming kind of a vicious cycle. And if one of these two politicians isn't grown up enough to back down and say, let's let go of what my individual constituency, what my individual voters want, but what my region needs and what's best for the country and the region, backs down and says, let's go for some dialogue. Well, we're looking at a pretty tough week here in Spain.
Professor, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Madrid.